What's going on, guys? Brace here. Today we'll have a bit different video. I will be talking about my expectations for changes in Infernal Dwarves, Vampires, Demons and Dread Elves. Today I will be talking about the armies that I'm more familiar with, which is Infernal Dwarves and Vampire Covenants. I'm not going to do the regular BLT job, I'm just going to point out what things, in my opinion, could be a bit cheaper or a bit more expensive. As we know, the approach the teams are taking is to make bad stuff better, not to make overpowered stuff worse. So that's the approach I'm also taking in this video. I will try to make it pretty fair for all the armies. And on Sunday videos in the corresponding weeks, we will see how the teams worked on the books. Again, I'm very grateful for the team for the job they are making, and I know that how hard it is and how time constraints can be very painful sometimes. So, as I said, I'm not going to say about specific point changes, because this is much harder work. You have to test the combinations that can fit now. You have to test how would you build the list. You have to list build around it. I'm just going to point out things that I think are a bit underpowered or a bit overpowered in the armies that I will be talking about. So let's start with Infernal Dwarves. This, as you can see, is the current army book version for me, since I'm pre-recording it. This is a 204 version. I don't think that there will be much changes for the general rules, since I've heard that this update is mostly about point changes, and that's what I'm expecting. I'm not also talking about general feeling of the army, just about particular units here. So let's start with the special equipment. I think there is a good amount of items that could be decreased, and there is one item that wants to be increased. So through all those videos you will see items that deserve price decrease to be marked green, and things that deserve price increase, in my opinion, to be marked red. So there is a burning steel that I think I've never seen. I think there is quite interesting build with it, but it requires some point decrease, and we'll see how this goes. Then all armor enchantments, especially Secrets of Mithril. I think additional Aegis enchantments are very bad in general, so I definitely think they deserve the price decrease. Ring of Desiccation, it used to be very popular, but with the restriction to on-foot only, with new hereditary spell, and with easy access to alchemy, I think it's pretty useless and practically nobody takes it, so it would be nice to have this become cheaper. The Bullhorn of Nezibekesh. Engineers are very rarely used, mainly because the ranges of spells are pretty low. So if you want to keep your engineer near war machines, not only you are spending a lot of points, because this is an engineer and most likely a mage. You need a unit to hold him, and shooting weapons in Infernal Dwarves have a very short range as well. So this item was supposed to help with that, but it is just too pricey. Heat Haze, the item which was supposed to help the bulls to appear a bit more. Again, just a bit too pricey, but I think it's quite good design. And the one item that I would personally want to see be more expensive is Icon of the Infernal, because I think it is in the vast majority of Infernal Dwarves lists, and rightfully so, because extra attribute, it doesn't seem that much, but if it's for every spell, it can really work miracles. Let's start with the Overlord from the units. First of all, the more important thing is the mounts. So both Small Bull and Great Bull seem to not have any action recently, so probably they should be decreased. And from the weapon section, I think both Flintlock Axe and Infernal Weapon are pretty bad choice on Overlord, since they only give +1 strength in close combat, and Flintlock Axe blocks usage of the shield, so I haven't seen anyone use them. I rarely see Great Weapon in use, but I think if Bull of Shamut gets enough play, then possibly Great Weapon and Bull of Shamut will not be that bad. Vizier, I think, is completely fine, but the Chosen of Lugal, it is actually a pretty interesting point I want to make, because now if you see Lugars, being picked, you see them picked only with Chosen of Lugar. So what I would suggest is increase Chosen of Lugar's price further and decrease the price of regular disciples respectively. The scoring added to the disciples is really huge. Scoring Unbreakable unit with 5 up ward save is very, very good. For the weapon options of Chosen of Lugar, I think Infernal weapon is inferior to Great Weapon, so I would like to see this decreased. Prophet. As I already mentioned, Engineer doesn't seem like that competitive choice, especially because it takes a lot of points from the category. Infernal weapon doesn't seem that worth investing. And then you have Bull of Shamut and Temple Lamasu, which are both pretty mediocre choices. It's pretty interesting that you can have Wizard Adept on Lamasu, but still I think Bull of Shamut is more interesting. So I would rather see a bigger decrease on Lamasu than on Bull of Shamut. Since on Bull of Shamut you can actually have some action going on. If you pick a Hero's Heart, for example, then you can have a pretty fighty model that also is a very good wizard. Tauruk, Subjugator. I think there is only one build unfortunately now, but it's pretty decent, so it should work. The only problem is that it mostly uses the Infernal Weapon plus and Gauntlets of Madzap combination, so paired weapons and Great Weapon practically not used. They could be even free here. Hobgoblin Chieftain, the Backstabber boss, again never used because Backstabbers are just really bad, and he doesn't bring that much to the unit, so I think this is the reason. The mounts we already talked about. And then core. Core is a huge problem in this army because most people tend to use with flintlock axes between 10 and 15 of them, but mostly 10. I've seen some people use Infernal warriors with great weapons, but those are really rare. So I think Infernal warriors as general definitely deserve a decrease on blunderbusses, and maybe deserve a decrease on the starting size, because if anything I only saw the bigger units being taken. Saddle Guards probably deserve a decrease on additional models, but the flintlock axes with shields should be a bit more expensive, because I definitely don't see an option of flintlock axes without shields being picked, and they are definitely the best core pick for now. Hobgoblins used to be pretty decent unit, but because of changes to Volifier, I think the bows are overpriced on them, and the base price of the unit is also pretty bad. And Backstabbers, again, not really used. They seem interesting, but in the end you have much better choices in core, so they should probably get a price decrease. Orc Slave, with current changes to occultism, I think they might be more interesting, but the prices for additional models is pretty bad, so we only see units of 20 going around without any equipment choices, because equipment choices are also very expensive. If you look at them as a 20 model practically chaff unit, then 20 toughness 4 models for 115 points is nice, but if you start buying things on top, then they become very, very expensive really fast. So that's why I would love to see those changes to be made. For the Immortals, I think starting points could decrease a bit, but additional models could increase a bit. And for Tauruks, I think shields are pretty much auto-include. And if you want to have bigger units, then they most likely go for Infernal weapons. I think great weapons are interesting choice, but I would still go for Infernal weapons, and paired weapons are just obsolete. So maybe something could be done about that. Tauruk Anointed, I think I've only seen the bigger units of 5 or 6 with Infernal weapons, shields, and the Banner of Shamut. Banner of Shamut is excellent for those guys, I have to admit that. And I think that this combination is interesting. I think Germany ETC team used 5 of them, but paired weapons and great weapon alternatives are much worse. So those should be possibly a bit cheaper, as well as the starting unit size. So maybe if you decrease the starting unit size, you could also increase the additional models so that the current units are at the same level. Hobgoblin Wolf Riders, the bows, I've never seen bows bought on them. You don't want to pay more for your chaff, so 1 point here wouldn't hurt, I guess. We come to Infernal Artillery. I think not many people use Infernal Artillery nowadays, and rightfully so. Rocket Battery, constantly overpriced. Volcano Cannon is overshadowed by the Gunnery team with Flamethrower. And then the Bound Demon, universally overpriced through all 3 of the weapons, in my opinion. And then for the Gunnery teams, Flamethrower and Volley Gun seem at least interesting, but the Grenade Launcher with only D6 plus 1 shots could get a price decrease. I can totally see that happening. And then for Bounce and Bindas, as I said with the Chosen of Luga, I would love to see starting cost going down, possibly with additional model cost going up, and exchange of paired weapons for great weapons should be lower because nobody uses them with great weapons. So at least 1 point here would be very nice. For the Infernal engine, I think the Sharpened Guns update is much better than the Steam Hammers, even though it takes the barrage section. But I think this is also because you don't take the regular war machines from barrage section, so you don't have that many points used there. And the Armored Giant, maybe a small point decrease. Compared to other giants, he's not that interesting, and the weapon choices he have are not that good. The Mining Pig is very random actually, so that would be good to have those decreased. Okay, so that's the summary for the Infernal Dwarves. I think there are quite a lot of changes that could be made. Many of them are very subtle, but could help in the list building process. My aim with the changes that I wanted to see is to make the list building process actually harder, because it's always good to have much more viable options in the book. So now let's go to Vampire Covenants. This is a very interesting book with a bit more diversification and the whole bloodline system. So again, the core rules shouldn't change. As well as here, I don't think that, I think hereditary casting values are pretty good. The Von Karnstein bloodline is a bit too pricey together with Stormcaller, but I think it is important not to make it too cheap, because I think in the last season pretty much everyone played Von Karnsteins, and many lists at the ATC had Stormcaller. So if you make it too cheap, then we can go to Von Karnstein domination all over again. The Nosferatu Ancient Blood Power, it is pretty weird. I wouldn't think it's worth it, especially because Count Nosferatu is not really much better than the Courtier Nosferatu. So this one should probably get a price decrease, I guess. And then from random other powers, Unbreakable Will, interesting design to help the core units, but it didn't really work out, especially because Karnsteins are pretty bad and the Hour of the Wolf is just amazing, so there is no comparison between them. Unbreakable Will could easily be 20 points cheaper, and still I think Hour of the Wolf would be much better. Flying Horror, this is actually pretty interesting, but it doesn't suit the Strigoi playstyle that much. And the Forbidden Path, which is just bizarre. I have never seen it being used, and I don't think that it will be used even at 0, because just other choices are much better. And the paths that give you the choice aren't that good to split the spells either. So for example, if you take the Evocation, you don't want to switch your master to Adepts, because you need the magical movement spell. Same goes for Occultism, especially with Nosferatu, you rather have the Arcane Knowledge with Occultism. And then the third one is Cosmology, but as the other two paths are not cooperating with the Blood Power well, then there is no chance that you will pair up the Cosmology with any of those. So special equipment, I think both the weapons seem to be a bit overpriced. The True First can actually be very interesting, so maybe I wouldn't touch that, but potentially it could be a bit cheaper. But the cursed medal seems like a gimmick. So for the characters, you can see something pretty weird here because there are many things that I would change, but this is mainly because I would love to change the vampire count and food price, and the changes to all the mounts are just offsetting this change. So for example, if they wanted to lower the on foot vampire count by 10, then you would need to raise all the mounts back by 10 to offset this change so that the mounted hero costs the same. Monstrous Revenant is a bit lacking, so this could stay the same even if the vampire count gets decreased, and Shrieking Horror is absolutely terrible for the Strigoi, so he should definitely get a decrease. Also, I'm not sure why light armor is just not the base equipment. So the same goes for Courtier. I think on Courtier foot is worse. You should be able to just have an on-foot Courtier cheaper. Same goes for light armor, and I think Halberd also on the Courtier is worse than other weapon picks. Necromancer. First of all, the Dead Arise spell. I think there is pretty much no reason for the inconsistency in the price of Dead Arise spell between Necromancer and Vampires. I know at some point it was meant to discourage people from taking Necromancer only armies, but I think that's not the case anymore, and 5 points, that's not much anyway. All the mounts for Necromancer are overpriced, definitely. Nobody ever sees Necromancer mounted, so I think that's a good thing to point out. For Barrow King, this is the first moment when I want to increase something in this book, I guess. So the Skeletal Steed should probably be increased, but the on-foot guy should be decreased. I think the 1-up rerollable build is very viable with 4 wounds, toughness 5. It's one of the best cowboys in the game, but the on-foot version is lacking, and the weapon options for him are overshadowed by the hero's heart anyway. So the Felwright, I haven't seen neither the on-foot version or any mounted version, so probably all of those should go down. Banshees are actually pretty fine, I think. No need for a change there. Okay, the Colossal Zombie Dragon upgrade. This is pretty weird, because for 100 points you get extra weapon skill and extra armor save, but your base becomes colossal, literally, and I think it's totally not worth it. So this should be decreased severely. And then the Great Monstrous Revenant gets the Devastating Charge +1 strength +1 AP, but also the base gets much bigger. So this is also a nerf, so this should probably be free. I know this is meant to allow people to use the Necrac models, but there is no reason that this upgrade is not free then. Let's go to core. I think halberds are overpriced on skeletons, because the spears are just straight off better as a close combat weapon, and halberds deny you shields. So for skeletons, parry is actually very important. So I think even with halberds for free, this would be a pretty hard choice. Ghouls are only seen in bigger units, so the natural thing to do is to decrease the starting points and increase the additional models. And bat swarms are never seen, so I would guess that they should drop down a bit. Barrow Guards as well. As we are playing vampires, mostly bigger units are used, and that's nothing surprising, but still we can make small Barrow Guard units even cheaper than they are now and make additional models even more expensive without the threat of balance, but maybe we will see some smaller units. And if you don't want to encourage that small units, then just pop the starting size to 20 or 25. That would be a very valuable option too. Because if people don't want to play 15 model units, then why keep the minimum at that low? Barrow Knights, I think they can be decent as additional scoring units, since vampires usually lack scoring a bit. But the bigger units are not as good in my opinion, so probably the additional models could be decreased. And the Ghast starting size already seems ridiculously cheap, but still it is not seen, and they could use some help in that regard. Great, but nobody takes the bigger units. Maybe someone will take them at 10 points per additional model. Cadaver Wagon, obviously overpriced. Altar of Undeath, a bit overpriced, I think, with the loss of the long range attack. It changed the playability of the model. Taking altars pushes you into a very specific playstyle, so maybe they should decrease in price just a bit to offset that. Coaches are fine. Phantom Hosts, I think bigger units can be fine, but smaller units, not really. There is much better chaff in the army, and the smaller units cannot stand against any opponent. They cannot hold them for much longer, and with reanimation only one, it's pretty hard for them. The raids, additional models, probably could go up, since again we mostly see units of 10 or 9 or maybe 8, but practically never units of 5. And the reverse goes for Spectral Hunters, which are very good in units of 5, but not very good in units of 10. Freaking Horror, it's a shame he's not used. I very like this model, but he's just one use only model practically, and for this price, this is a no-go. Vampire Knights, additional models could go down, but I see I didn't mark this here, but I would say that the Brotherhood of the Dragon option could go up in price, because I still think the vanilla Vampire Knights are pretty bad. In units of 3, they can be pretty decent scoring, but in units of 6, they are pretty overpriced. Winged Reapers, Halberds and paired weapons are at the same price, but paired weapons seem to be straight off better, with an extra attack, extra pinch of weapon skill and breaking parry, with lethal strikes and with potential reroll 2 wound from evocation and -1 toughness from evocation. The extra +1 strength is just not offsetting that, so halberds could definitely go cheaper. And for vampire spawns, we see bigger units get much more popular, so if the big units get more expensive, then I would be definitely fine with that. But the smaller units seem to be pretty good and not overused, so I would leave them as they are now. So that's my thoughts about vampires. All of those thoughts I presented here were mainly aimed at the internal balance of the book. Obviously there is also an external factor, so you have to ask yourself how many nerfs or buffs do you need to do for the book to be comparable to others. Assuming we have only 3 tiers, I would say both Infernal Dwarves and Vampires are around tier 2. And as the balancing is aimed to push the power level up, then I would guess that all those changes that I mentioned could be easily implemented and be according to the policy of the 9th Age teams. So again, I'm hoping to get my hands on the update as soon as it comes, and I will see how much I guessed right. Again, thanks a lot for the teams for all the work they did. And see you guys on Sunday with the Vampires and Infernal Dwarves recap. Cheers.